Berwick. Gus told me that this is a very special video that he made for his wife Catherine.
Yes, bro. Gus made a couple of picture frames with Bible verses engraved in the frame. Catherine holds these verses very dear to her heart.
Happy New Year to all from beautiful Australia. I'm Natasha, and I'll once again narrate Gus's video. We spent Christmas and the holidays here in the outback, and had none of that white stuff called snow. Gus was busy in his shop making a couple of framed Bible verses for his dear wife Catherine, and that is what this video is focused on. Throughout Catherine's illness, and especially the past few weeks where she has been battling double pneumonia, she has relied again and again on these verses. The first frame is constructed from a panel engraved with the Glowforge Pro and framed from raised panel frames. Here Gus is securing the cherry plywood to the bed with double-sided tape. This ensures that the engraving will be consistent throughout the verse. The following is a presentation of how Gus calculated the rail and stile dimensions. Speed ahead to 3:30 of this video if you don't like math. To determine the dimensions of the rails and stiles, Gus had to work backwards from the known dimensions of the engraved panel, which is 293 by 253 millimeters. This presentation shows the formulas to first find the dimensions of the door, then the rails and stiles. By the way, Gus is working more and more with the metric system because he finds it so much easier to do the math. So the final dimensions of the stiles were determined to be 399 millimeters, 256 millimeters for the rails. Gus has posted the Freud PDF for determining these calculations below.
Berwick, Gus sure loves to make picture frames.
Gus loves to make picture frames, but he also is planning some big projects such as a corner cabinet and a solid oak front door.
Once the rails and stiles have been properly milled, it's time for a trip to the GUS'S router table. Although the final width of the rails and stiles are 63 millimeters, Gus allows for an additional 25 millimeters. When routing, the extra 25 millimeters provides added stability and safety to the routing. Once the routing is complete, Gus then goes to the table saw and rips them down to the desired width of 63 millimeters. Here we see Gus making the proper height adjustments to the Freud door router bit set, starting first with the cope cutter on the end of the rails. Once that is done, it is on to the stick cutter for the grooves on the rails and stiles. It is always a good idea to first use a sample piece to get the proper fit. Here we see Gus using the stick cutter to route the grooves in the rails and stiles, and finishing up on the table saw ripping them to the proper width of 63 millimeters.
Berwick, why hasn't America fully adopted the metric system?
Bro, baby sister, America hasn't fully adopted the metric system yet. But believe me, we're slowly inching towards it.
Now comes the easy part: gluing and assembling the frame. Gus usually adds a small strip of tape to the back edges of the engraved frame to prevent movement. If properly routed, the frame goes together very nicely and is easy to clamp. These frames only require 2 clamps to secure the rails and stiles together. Only a small amount of edge sanding is needed to smooth the joint between the rails and the stiles, which is quickly accomplished on the Grizzly oscillating edge sander. Now it is onto the downdraft table for final sanding and then onto the finishing table. Just a couple coats of General Finishes polyacrylic water-based finishes creates a very nice sheen finish. Gus uses 320 grit sandpaper between the coats, then applies paste wax for the final coat. Gus adds a finishing touch by routing a keyhole on the back of the frame with the Infinity Tools keyhole picture hanging bit. The heirloom is completed by engraving a personal message on the back with the Glowforge Pro. So we have now come to the second part of the video, and Gus will be constructing a mitered frame with a strip of walnut and maple inlay. As with the previous frame, Gus used the Glowforge Pro to engrave Kathy's favorite Bible verse, Psalm chapter 27 verse 1. This verse was engraved on a piece of maple plywood. After milling the frame parts, Gus goes back to the Gesso router table to route decorative edges, rabbets, and a groove to house the inlay.
Berwick, did you know Gus almost hit a rabbit on his way home last night? He missed it by a hair.
That's pretty funny, broer. But a rabbit in woodworking is different than a hare. And spelled as follows: R-A-B-B-E-T.
Once the 1/4 inch groove is cut on all rails and stiles, the walnut and maple inlay is inserted into the grooves with a touch of glue. It is not essential that the inlays fit perfectly in the grooves, as any imperfections can be easily erased with a light sanding. The glued pieces can then be clamped back to back and allowed to dry for a few hours. Once dried, it is onto the table saw. Here Gus is using the Woodpecker's auto-scale miter sled to cut the 45-degree miters. The miter sled worked to perfection. Now that all the parts have been completed, it is time for gluing and clamping. Here Gus is gluing the corners liberally, followed by assembling in the rocker picture frame clamp. The clamp works well to ensure all corners are 90 degrees, as well as creating a strong joint at the corners. The miter frame is certainly strong enough to accept as is, however, Gus wants to insert maple splines at the corners to not only enhance the joint strength, but to also create an attractive spline at each corner. Gus turned to the rockler spline jig to root the splines at the corners. The jig is a little flimsy, but using some wood blocks to sandwich the frame proved to work sufficiently.
Berwick, why does Gus use splines on his picture frames?
Broer, Gus uses splines for two main purposes. One is to greatly strengthen the corner joints. Adding splines give the joints rigidity and strength that helps keep the joint together for a lifetime. The second main reason is for looks, to liven up the appearance of the picture frame. Gus loves to combine maple and walnut, resulting in the frame really standing out.
Once the glued splines are dry, Gus turns to the band saw to trim off the splines, followed by further trimming on the table saw. Finally, Gus returns to the downdraft table to do the final sanding to prepare the frame for finishing. Here Gus is using his Mercadero's 5-inch orbital sander. Gus finishes off the frame by applying OD's oil followed by a coat of OD's wax. OD's is an outstanding way to apply finish to a variety of woodworking projects, quickly becoming Gus's favorite finishing product. Well, it's goodbye from Natasha from Down Under, and time for Gus's takeaways.
He will cover you with his feathers. Under his wings you will find refuge. Psalms 91:4. In May of 2020, I was diagnosed with skin cancer that traveled to the facial nerves. It was and still is a humbling time in my life. I currently am in immunotherapy every 3 weeks. However, I have truly felt God's presence every step of the way. As I went through my 33 rounds of radiation, I felt the presence of God every step of the way. That's why I love this verse. I felt as though I was safely tucked under his wings. I'm happy to say that I'm cancer-free today. My life verse is Psalms 27:1. The Lord is my life and salvation. Of whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? I now realize why God put this trial in my life, to be a witness and light to all those around me. Jesus is my hope and comfort. I have nothing to fear. He truly got me through the past few years. I want to take this trial and glorify Jesus through it.